Hello everybody, I am Джаксалыкова A.S, the teacher trainer in the National Center for Professional Development of Өрлеу, and today's podcast, the first topic of today's podcast is planning a CLIL lesson. So, how do we plan a CLIL lesson or series of lessons? We have such question. Before we can plan a CLIL lesson or series of lessons, we need to be clear about our CLIL context and teaching aims. We need to identify the content, language and skills which learners will be taught. We also need to consider the different stages of the lesson and the sequence of a series of CLIL lessons. Talking about learning outcomes. In order to focus on the learner rather than the teacher, learning outcomes are often used. These are statements of what most learners should be able to know, be able to do and be aware of as a result of a learning experience. Learning outcomes can be wide or narrow, but they need to be achievable and measurable. Learning outcomes also focus on learning to learn. An example is to be able to give peer feedback to help improve someone's work. So, there are some advantages of learning outcomes as for learners, so for teachers. Let's talk about advantages of using learning outcomes for teachers. They help describe courses clearly. They provide continuity, focus on whole class, group and individual needs. They guide the design of tasks. They can be used as a checklist for feedback. They make assessment clear. And talking about advantages of using learning outcomes for learners, we can mention that they are learner-centered, they show what should be achieved, they help learners have goals so they can check progress, and they enable differentiation as making provision for less able and more able learners. So next, talking about planning a lesson. It is very difficult to start something new, so look at this example of a CLIL science lesson plan for young learners. It is the first lesson and fits into the course or syllabus at the start of a unit about materials and their properties. So you can see here introduction. The content is introduction to magnetism, materials and their properties. And teaching aims, you can see it is to enable learners to understand that different materials have different properties, to develop learners' abilities to group materials and to predict, observe and record findings of an experiment, to raise learners' awareness of magnetism. And so here you can see learning outcomes and assessment. This part is due to content, as you can see. So, learning outcomes. Learners should know the names of some materials and their properties, and that some materials are magnetic and some are not. Next, learners should be able to classify materials according to different criteria using a Venn diagram and predictions, observe and record findings. And also, according to learning outcomes, learners should be aware that some materials have iron in them and aware of how to cooperate in a group. And talking about assessments, here we assess them if learners can identify the name, properties of a range of materials, and if they can sort materials into different groups and state classification, make predictions, record findings accurately, and if they can cooperate in a group. Next, communication part. You know, there are 4 C's and we should reflect all these 4 C's in our planning lesson. And then communication. Vocabulary. Here you reflect revisited and new vocabulary, and you can see this on the slide, and some sentence structures that will help learners to build their sentences. For example, I think it, I think they are, it will stick or it won't stick. So function is describing materials and will prediction. And there are examples of communication you can see. It is pointing to and naming materials, labeling materials, sharing ideas about properties and reporting classifications, and stating which objects are magnetic will stick to the magnet. And next, cognition. thinking about thinking. Yes, it is identifying if learners can identify objects and properties of the objects, compare different materials, classify materials, predict and reasoning. And examples of cognition: sorting materials into 2 different groups. See Venn diagram below. And classifying range of properties, and guessing and then explaining why some materials are magnetic. And the next, citizenship. It is the same as culture, and learners should be aware of recycling issues. And example of citizenship is separating magnetic and non-magnetic objects into different bins. And next slide, the teacher shows us resources she used. For example, it is 3-4 bags of 10-12 objects, at least half of which are known to the learners, magnets, and drawing of 2 Venn diagrams on board, worksheets plus differentiated worksheets for less able learners, and vocabulary card. And the procedure of the lesson. The teacher shows that she works with the whole class at the beginning. She activates prior knowledge of materials. The learners look around in the classroom and point to something made of, for example, made of plastic or metal or glass maybe. CLIL learners are encouraged to produce content language which they already know in a warm-up or brainstorming activity. This is called activating prior knowledge, and learners might use some native language, their language one, to do this. We can then translate if appropriate. In this way, CLIL learners are encouraged to produce content language at the start of the lesson. So next, groups. Sort materials from bags into 2 different groups using the Venn diagram. So here learners work in groups together. It is communication part of CLIL, as you understand. Sort materials according to properties given. They work with adjectives and opposites, which you mentioned above in your language structures. And also they predict which objects are magnetic and which are non-magnetic, and check predictions using magnets. So then teacher offers to do feedback ideas, ask question, were there any surprises? And individually then learners work with worksheets, record their observations. And at the end of the lesson, the whole class, it is final plenary, very useful. TPR, you know, it is total physical response. Some learners act as magnets and some are materials and acoustics. It's something like in game form, yes? Learners benefit from a plenary at the end of a CLIL lesson, when the whole class is asked a few questions about what they have learned. Questions might include, tell me 3 new things you learned today, or what was new, or what was difficult, maybe what was surprising, or maybe what more would you like to find about it. And again, some native language may be used if learners are new to CLIL. Also, we use here differentiation. Always in your lessons, please use differentiation. It is additional vocabulary cards and gap-fill sentences for less able or more able students. And follow up, investigate and separate school rubbish into recycling. And in the end of the lesson, you do reflection as usual. So during the lessons, you can use visual organizers. Here you see only 4 of them, but there are much more of them, as you know. And you see the first, it is Carroll diagram, yes. The second it is a flow chart. The third, it is mind map, and the fourth, it is tree diagram, yes. Next, also on our lessons, we can use such materials as subject-specific dictionaries, posters, supplementary materials in printed form, ICT, digital cameras, visuals, computer labs, realia, flashcards. Everything will help you to make your lesson better. So, CLIL materials. Talking about CLIL materials, we can say that they can be at a text level, sentence level, and word level. At text level, it is visuals, diagrams. At sentence level, it is definitions and short explanations. And at word level, it is label or highlight key content vocabulary. And activity types. You can use these to make your lesson more interesting for your learners. Activity types, there are word, sentence, text, table, completion, pyramid discussion, labeling, multiple choice, information transfer, gap fill, matching, jigsaw reading, and listening. So, thank you for your attention, and I hope my material would help you to make your lesson better and full of useful information for learners.